and, no matter how hungry he might be, refused to eat it raw. The sea furnished occasional variety of diet in the way of turtles and devil-fish, and I contributed rice, tinned meat, and other preserved food which I bought of Moy Ling whenever I imagined his confidence in me was beginning to falter. That was a risky procedure, only to be undertaken on the days when I was so filled with animal spirits that I more than half believed in my wealth, in my power to draw money or anything else I wanted out of the clear, dry air of Rutiaro. One thing I had wanted from the first, above all others, a house. The idea of imposing indefinitely upon Faery's hospitality was distasteful, and no boats were expected within 5 or 6 months. I had not, in years, lived for so long a period at any one place. Here was an opportunity I had often dreamed of for having a home of my own. I should have to ask the chief for it, and at first thought the request seemed a large one. Then, too, how could I say to him with any show of logic, "Faery, I am not willing to bother you longer by occupying the guest bed in your house. Therefore, will you please give me a house to myself?" He might think I had peculiar ideas of delicacy, but further reflection convinced me that while I could not ask him for a pair of trousers, not even for so trifling a thing as a shirt-button, since he would have to purchase it at Moy Ling's store, I might legitimately suggest the gift of a house. It would cost only the labor of making it, and that was not great. At Rutiaro, houses were built in less time than was needed to sail across the lagoon and back. The inhabitants might reasonably have adopted the early Chinese method of roasting pig by putting the carcasses in their dwellings and setting fire to the thatch. It would have been a sensible procedure, employed at times when the old thatch needed renewal. Nothing permanent would have been destroyed except the framework of poles, and that could be replaced as easily as firewood could be cut for a Maori oven. The upshot of the matter was that I was given not only a house, but an island of my own to set it on. I, who had lived much of my life up 4 or 5 flights of stairs, in furnished rooms, looking out on chimney-pots and brick courts filled with odors and family washings. The site was a small motu lying at the entrance to the lagoon, 4 miles from the village island. It had a name which meant the place where the souls were eaten. Once a man, his wife, and 2 children went there to fish on the reef near the pass. All of them were taken ill of some mysterious disease and died on the same day. As their souls left their bodies, they were seized and eaten by some vindictive human spirits in the form of sea-birds. The legend was evidently a very ancient one, and the events which it described had happened so long ago that fear of the place had largely vanished. Nevertheless, the chief tried to persuade me to choose another site, and Poura, when she learned that I wanted to live on the Soul Eaters' Island, was deeply concerned. Neither of them could understand why I should want to live away from the village island. I wince even now when I think of the appalling tactlessness of that request, but the fact is that the Paumotuans themselves, by their example, had got me into the vicious habit of truth-telling in such matters. There is no word in their language for tact. They believe that a man has adequate, although sometimes hidden, reasons for doing what he wants to do, and they understand that it explains seemingly uncourtly behavior. I had accepted, almost unconsciously, their own point of view, so that it didn't occur to me to invent any polite falsehoods. But my knowledge of Paumotuan was more limited than Faery's knowledge of French, and how was I to explain my desire for so lonely a place as the Soul Eaters' Island? The Paumotuans, from their scarcity of numbers, the isolation of their fragments of land, the dangers of the sea around them, are drawn together naturally, inevitably. How make clear to them the unnatural gregariousness of life in great cities? Suddenly I thought of my picture postcard of the Woolworth Building. I told them that in America many people, thousands of them, were cooped together in houses of that sort. I had been compelled to spend several years in one, and had got such a horror of the life that I had come all the way to the Cloud of Islands, searching for a place where I might be occasionally alone. While the postcard was passing from hand to hand, Faery, the constable, loyal friend in every emergency, gave color to my explanation by describing for the 1,001st time, I suppose, his adventures in San Francisco. Dusk deepened. The last ghostly light faded from the clouds along the northern horizon, and still he talked on, and the idlers on the chief's veranda listened with as keen interest as though they had never heard the story before. Pora, who was at work on my new wardrobe, lit a lamp and placed it on the floor beside her, shading it from her eyes with a piece of matting. The light ran smoothly over her brown hands, and the mountain of shadow behind her blotted out the forms of the trees. Now and then she put down her work and gazed intently in Faery's direction. His voice rose and fell, thrilled with excitement, died away to a deep whisper of awe as he told of the wonders he had seen, the streetcars, the lofty buildings, elevators which rose to an immense height as swiftly as a coconut would fall, the trains, the motors, the ships, the pictures which were alive. He imitated sounds with amazing fidelity, and his gestures, vaguely seen in the gloom, were vividly pictorial of the marvels he had met with in his travels. The story ended abruptly, and Faery sat down, conscious of the effect he had produced. No one spoke for a long while. Then the chief, who was sitting beside me, broke the silence with that strange Polynesian exclamation of wonder too great for words. "Ah, ah, 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 ah," uttered with distinct, rapid precision, like the staccato of machine-gun fire. He laid his hand on my knee affectionately, with an air of possessorship, and at the contact a feeling of pride rose in me, as though I were the planner of the cities, the magician whose brain had given birth to the marvels Faery had described. But conceit of that kind may be measurably reduced by a moment of reflection, and I remembered that the extent of my contribution to my native land was that I had left it. Small cause for vanity there. However, I had no mind for another tussle with my conscience. I had been the indirect cause of eloquence in Faery and of the enjoyment in all his auditors. That was enough for one evening, on the credit side. On the other side, to Faery, to Pora, to his children, and to all the kindly, hospitable people of Rutiaro, I was under an obligation I could never hope to cancel. But they didn't expect me to cancel it. I was not even under the necessity of showing appreciation. Just as there is no word in their language for tact, there is none approaching our word, gratitude, in meaning. To a man in my position, owner of Soul Eaters Island, and of a house to be built there the following day, that was something to be grateful for. The Chinese language is richer, I believe, in terms implying obligation. I was reminded less pleasantly of another account on the debit side, by the flare of a match which lit up, for a moment, the pensive, cadaverous face of Ling. End of chapter 7.